Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome. This is going to be a long one. At least that's the feeling in my bones here when it comes to a number of different things that are taking place. So let me dive in. Plenty of audio to play in this particular episode also. Okay, first of all, the so-called peace deal, quote unquote, between Israel and Hamas is apparently underway, even though killing is apparently still taking place, and there are certain bombings that are still taking place. But, again, there's apparently some kind of a deal in place. But we have to review how all of this became the way that it became. First of all, as we all know, the way that the mainstream media tells us particular stories is not the real story. This right here has got to be everyone's foundation when it comes to any particular story that's being told, even on the positive end of particular things. So it doesn't mean that anything is over necessarily. It's just, again, you got to take this with a huge grain of salt every single time. And we have the right to be skeptical because we have no reason to trust any of these individuals. First of all, on October 7th, all of that was a giant stand-down order. A great deal of people, even in the mainstream media, have commented on that. Everyone from Tucker to even Candace Owens to even Charlie Kirk and a number of other individuals. They've openly stated this, that there's absolutely no way that the October 7th thing from a couple of years ago was just random. It was not. And it's also, of course, in the Israeli playbook, specifically that of Zionists, to kill their own people, blame other individuals, and then, of course, kick off a war as a result. They do this all the time, too. I mean, it dates back to even Operation Northwoods. With that said, it doesn't necessarily mean, again, that good things aren't happening and that particular people haven't been squeezed in a particular direction to, again, submit. We know that Zionists have been funding Hamas the entire time, by and large. Because, again, with no money and no funding, they wouldn't exist in the first place, which means in that general area, who's doing the funding in the interest of expanding their own land? It's clearly the Zionists, and it's clearly Israel. But again, this is where humanity starts to sneak in a little bit and starts to change minds, which is a good thing. You have plenty of people in Israel who have openly stated that they don't like Netanyahu, that they don't like the murder that's taking place. They've seen the imagery, they've seen the videos, they've talked with individuals who are there, they know exactly what's going on. And the Zionists and the IDF have been running basically their own operation this entire time with the help of Netanyahu and with, of course, his entire support. And they don't like that, which is why, again, the vast majority of people in Israel don't like Netanyahu. Now, the mainstream media, of course, is never going to spin it that way, but that doesn't require any spin. That's just the truth. But they're not going to say that. They're not going to show that. So in typical fashion, even in a moment like this, you have a Netanyahu who's been funding both sides of this conflict on a constant basis, which, of course, is a genocide. It is the literal definition of a Holocaust in that the term Holocaust means a burnt offering to their God, which is Satan. And that right there again is the historic basis for why they do what they do the way that they do it. But with that said, again, is he going to go out quietly, Netanyahu? I have no idea. Is he completely controlled now by Trump and the good guys? It's possible. However, with all of that aside, even for a moment, look at the way that the most radical within any of these religious fractions actually exist. It doesn't mean that the Zionists are going to quit. There will always be Zionists out there who, again, are Israel first to the bone, so they say, using that land as if they own it in some way, when clearly they don't, certainly not from a historic perspective. But you're always going to have, again, those radicals that exist, and you're going to have those radicals doing their best to entrap and basically recruit as many of their own so-called people as they can to make it look like they're all on the same side. It isn't any different with the Christian movement in the United States. That a great deal of them, of course, say, well, Israel first, Judeo-Christian, and all these other phrases, when in fact, none of that is real, and none of that is true either. they have to maintain their grift also, like the Joel Osteens of the world. And again, all these mega church individuals, they have to continue that giant charade of Israel's our greatest ally, they're the chosen people, blah, blah, blah. It isn't any different with Zionists, and it's not any different with Christians. As far as Muslims are concerned, good Lord, just look at Dearborn, Michigan. Look at what's happening again across numerous places throughout the United States, including Texas, which also apparently possesses, I just learned this from Tucker Carlson's show, believe it or not, and a Texas individual that he had on his show, his name has slipped my mind, my apologies, but he was talking about how Texas is the 8th largest economy in the world, not to mention all of the mosques that exist there, and a number of other Muslim infiltrators that exist, again, trying to impose Sharia law, trying to normalize the 5 times daily prayers over the loudspeakers and all of that other stuff. It is an invasion. And this too, again, is I think fascinating and very disturbing at the same time, because the reason that I mention this is basically for this one fact, and this fact alone, is that all of these radical groups, whether they be radical Christians, radical Zionists / Jews, radical Muslims, what have you, they won't quit. They have orders. It is in their DNA to consistently go in their own direction for a variety of different reasons, but most of which just is basic conquest. The problem is that the megachurches and the Christian fraction of all of this, they've been overtaken by Zionists themselves, whether they want to admit it or not. And they're bringing down a lot of gullible people with them and entrapping and recruiting a lot of gullible people who don't know otherwise. So, in summary, I would say this. When it comes to any kind of a deal, I certainly hope that more innocent people don't get killed. That's not what needs to happen. I think that should go without saying. But even so, the crimes of what Zionism has done here, certainly since the beginning of time. It is biblical after all. It dates back that far. They killed Jesus Christ after all. But even so, all of that and everything that has been going on within recent years, certainly 9/11 and a number of other issues, the killing of JFK, et cetera, all of these moments, we'll call them, cannot be ignored. And you can't take your eye off of the ball again as to who the enemies really are. So again, if deals were cut and particular things were made and put into a so-called agreement in order to get fighting to stop, which would hopefully usher in, again, more of a Middle Eastern presence within that general area along the Mediterranean, which, as I've said in the past, and even Steve Bannon said it, elbowing out the Greater Israel Project, elbowing out Netanyahu, pushing all of that back to where, again, Israelis are basically just doing what they typically do, which is spit on Christians and 1,000 other things within actual Israel, but keeping them in their own sandbox over there by themselves with little to no influence whatsoever. I think that is ultimately the long-term goal. Now, again, I like what's happening with Antifa, and this is kind of a segue into Antifa here, but I like what's happening with that because that's a big, big deal. They have been funded by Zionists. I've been over the history of Antifa on the show before. Again, it dates back to the Bolshevik Revolution, even more specifically within Italy. That's why, of course, they are called anti-fascists, because it was the Italians and Mussolini who, of course, gave rise to that name, specifically as a political party, specifically meaning the term fascism, that it is a binding together of a nationalistic ideology that loves their nation, loves God, and loves its own people. That's not a bad thing. So the simple fact that a group is being called Antifa or anti-fascist, that means that they are, of course, pro-communist. It's a direct admission. They don't hide it. The mainstream media hides it because, of course, they don't want to get into the real history of it. They don't want to teach people anything. They're not interested in teaching people the real history of it. And there was only one other administration in the history of the world that went after Antifa. And of course, it was both Mussolini's government in Italy, and of course, it was Adolf Hitler and the German National Socialist DAP Party. They again declared Antifa as a terrorist organization and detrimental to a free and hardworking nationalistic people, and rightfully so. Again, Antifa didn't exist in the United States back in the 1930s, 1940s. It wasn't until, again, around the 1960s, 1970s, when they started to show themselves in particular different groups, we'll say, the Weather Underground, the Black Panthers. There were other groups and organizations as well. And it's not even that Antifa was even not here. They just weren't very well known. And it wasn't really until, I would say, Barack Obama's tenure, we'll say, as fake president of the United States, and unlawfully so. But it wasn't until him, and then, of course, the transition into the first Donald Trump administration where Antifa really started to show their true colors. Around 2015, 2016. That's really, again, when the American fraction of Antifa showed up. And yes, it wasn't just George Soros that was helping fund it, although he wasn't doing it with his own dollars. He was using USAID and other government taxpayer-funded organizations through the United States government to fund those organizations and then, of course, create money laundering, which, of course, is also the RICO statute, and again, pushing all of that money out to those particular organizations, and then, of course, getting the right people within the right political positions like prosecutors, chiefs of police, mayors, college professors, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden you have activism, quote unquote. And this activism carries with it all of the Bolshevistic tactics that existed during the Bolshevik Revolution, which of course led to the slaughters of tens of millions of people, in particular a free and individuals who wanted to be free, who also happened to be Christians. Again, that's the origin and then current state of Antifa. And then they had a roundtable just the other day in the White House regarding Antifa and who funds Antifa. And it's not just, again, the George Soros organization and all these other organizations. It is your own tax dollars. Let me play one audio clip from that roundtable the other day at the White House regarding this, again, specifically having to do with Antifa. This is about 3 minutes long. And this is an individual who, again, works for Peter Schweitzer. And these individuals, again, they follow the money. And they always have, and who gets what and where it comes from. Of course, it's also coming from our tax dollars, as we now know, and we certainly suspected. I should also mention this, and I'll read some of these again after this particular audio clip, but if you get on the Q board, operationq.pub, which is always linked in the description below of every single episode here, and you type in Antifa, A-N-T-I-F-A, either lowercase or uppercase in the search box in the upper right-hand side, you're going to get one hell of a history lesson. There are 67 posts having to do with Antifa. And you don't have to read the entirety of every single post. If you just want to hone in on the lines around the word Antifa inside of each Q post, you're going to get one amazing history lesson. Again, it is not German. It is not quote-unquote Nazi. It is not Nazism. It is not Adolf Hitler affiliated. It is not National Socialist DAP Party affiliated. Antifa has always been Zionist communists who are, again, against a free and together people who love hard work, God, patriotism, and all of that, just like they did back then. This also, I should mention this very quickly. Sorry for the digression here. While I before I play this audio clip, the reason, and I don't know if I've made too much mention of it on the show here, but the reason again that I find 1930s, 1940s, specifically 1930s European history, and even 1920s and 19-teens European history fascinating, is because it's the one thing, of course, that's never taught in American schools. And if it were taught properly and accurately, with proper references and resources and audio clips and speeches that were translated properly and books that were translated properly and everything else, people would be able to see the patterns that exist today, and accurately so. Even though there are endless hints to what's actually going on and what went on back then, we, of course, are fighting the exact same enemy, the same enemy that the German people fought back then, that they were being oppressed under, certainly during the 1920s. And then in very short order, in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler and the homies over there, they got things squared away rather quickly. They again designated not just Antifa, but communism as being a scourge that had to be gotten rid of within governments all across Europe, or else. And unfortunately, they were surrounded, of course, as we know, and they lost, which meant that communism was going to expand, which it has. But it's one of the reasons why I created and compiled, this, what I would call a short little documentary series having to do with the truth about Germany and Adolf Hitler. And again, you can look that up on BitChute and Rumble, and I've made now 3 parts of that specifically, and the 4th part will be out on Saturday evening, this coming Saturday evening. So if you're interested in watching part 4, I highly recommend it. Again, each one of them includes historic videos about it, actual speeches, the whole thing. And again, you'll start to see the truth a little bit at a time. But each one is about, again, over an hour long. And I highly recommend checking those out if you're interested. You, of course, can download them as well. I believe the first 2 parts are not available on BitChute, but I do have links to them on BitChute. And I'll, again, in part 4, in the description below, I will have links to all 4. And certainly all 3 there as well. And you can, again, download them at your leisure and watch them and save them for your archives if you're interested, or however you'd like to do it. Okay. With that aside, let me get to the audio here again. Give this a listen. They mentioned some of the funders, but again, keep in mind, it also comes from your own tax dollars, and certainly USAID, which was their backbone, which of course has now been broken. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
That this is not just a story about violence and chaos, as you alluded to, Mr. President. This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the Protest Industrial Complex, Riot Inc. And we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network. It's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem. And so I want to share 3 money facts with you about what we call Riot Inc. Number 1, like any corporation, Riot Inc. has many divisions. It doesn't just have the Antifa boots on the ground division. It has PR divisions. It has marketing divisions. It has a very well-funded legal division to get these boots on the ground back on the streets as quickly as possible. But it does have those investors that I mentioned. Number 2, we have identified dozens of radical organizations, not just the decentralized Antifa organizations, but dozens of radical organizations that have received more than $100 million from the Riot Inc. investors. These would be the lawyer groups. These would be the groups that advocate for calling good, honest Americans fascists, etc. And then 3, I think the most shocking thing is that we have found that more than $100 million in U.S. taxpayer funding has flowed into these funding networks, including at least $4 million to these very groups themselves, not just Antifa types, but there was an event in Atlanta called Stop Cop City. Over 60 rioters were charged with domestic terrorism. These groups received money for that from both the billionaire class as well as taxpayer money. So one other thing, this money helps fund the decentralized crowdfunding platforms. These are ways that Antifa, the John Brown Gun Club of Elm Fork, which had links to that attack on the ICE facility, the Socialist Rifle Association, and just because they don't have LLCs or EIN numbers doesn't mean they can't get paid. Some of these funding platforms, crowdfunding platforms, are funded by this network that we call Riot Inc. So, again, I want to thank you for your leadership, for the whole cabinet's leadership on this. We're going to keep following the money and appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Do you know the name of any of the funders? Do you know the names? Because if you do, I'd like you to give them to Cash or Pam.
Absolutely.
or Christy,
Yeah, we'll do
as
that.
soon as you can. That's all of you, because you probably know the names after a certain period of time. You tend to find out. But these are people that do not have good intention for the country, and that's treasonous, probably. So, very important, if you could do that, that would be great. Nobody would know better than you. You'll figure it out.
Again, he mentions some of the names in his presentation, and they all happen to be Jewish by and large. Again, they're Zionist communist Jews. That's the point. They tried to do it many years ago, a century ago. They've done it all over the world in numerous countries with their color revolutions, overthrowing governments, overthrowing elections, trying to subvert the will of a free people. They do this consistently. It is their thing. It is their playbook. It's their design. It's their blueprint. It's all they know. All they know is chaos. They hate order. And good order, like civil order, not, everybody listen to government. They know what's best. And even the President of the United States just said it. It's treason. You're talking about treason. Trying to overthrow a government and working with anybody, whether it be an NGO, a company, et cetera, to try to overthrow or subvert a free civil people in a free civil society is treason and sedition. And what's the penalty for that? It's supposed to be death. So let's make that stick for once. Let's watch that happen in the next 3 years, please. Please, let's watch that happen, because it has to happen. BioClandestine over on X said the following here regarding a great deal of these things, and again, this exposure, which is really embarrassing for anybody on the left, still on the left in this day and age, because they look like complete morons. He said the following, quote, "The entire thing is batshit crazy, and I'm tired of people pretending otherwise. The Dems are now engaging in an open insurrection against the federal government, all to protect murderers, rapists, violent criminals, gang members, domestic terrorists, illegal aliens, etc." Well, yeah. That's what happened again in the 19 teens and 1920s in Europe and in Germany and in Russia. Same thing. It says the Dems sided with criminals over their own law-abiding citizens. Future generations will look back on this era in complete disbelief. They won't be able to fathom how we allowed the Democrats to exist, let alone be allowed to govern over our cities. This is not politics anymore, they said. The Dems are engaging in an open rebellion against Trump, and they don't care how many innocents die in their crime-ridden cities during the process. The Dems have not only waged war against Trump, they are waging it against the American people. Not only are innocents being slaughtered by the criminals they refuse to put in jail, but the Dems are actively obstructing the will of the people and the result of the 2024 election. This is what the people voted for, but the Dems don't care. Our vote is irrelevant to them. They only care about retaining their corrupt power. This is, by definition, the opening stages of a civil war, unquote. Well, yes and no. The Civil War's been going on since the beginning of time. It's always existed. You had individuals sign the Declaration of Independence reluctantly. You had individuals sign the United States Constitution at the founding of our country reluctantly. They didn't want to. They were fine with King George. They were fine with the way that things were. And those individuals, again, have always existed in this country. So it's not new. It's just been a 250-year war, plus. Now let me bounce again over to the Q board and take a look at this. I've got these again in chronological order just based on the search term Antifa. I've capitalized all of it. The first post that pops up of these 67 posts is post 12 on October 30th of 2017, and it says the following. Military intelligence reference above is the absolute biggest inside drop this board will ever receive. Now think about why Antifa plays right into the plan. Always ahead. Good guys are winning, unquote. And then again, post 14. I'm not going to read the entirety of every post, but just give you a basic gist of where Antifa fits within these posts. And in post 14, again, from 2017, October, it says, why is Antifa allowed to operate? Again, that's toward the bottom of the actual post in a much larger post having to do with Hillary Clinton. Why aren't they classified as a terrorist organization yet? What happens if Soros-funded operations get violent and engage in domestic terrorism? What happens if mayors, police chiefs, police comms chiefs, commissioners do not enforce the law? What authority does POTUS have specifically over the Marines? Why is this important? And then it goes on and on and on. Post 28, go all the way to the bottom. It says, ha ha ha, Trump has had military infiltrate Antifa and all the dissenting local governments. Always 5 steps ahead, please be true. And then Q responded to this anon saying that and said, well done, picture being painted. Drop 337. It goes on, it says, the country is not divided. This is fake news. Antifa was organized purely for optics regarding division. It's fake. Again, another drop, let's see, 489. It says, think George Soros pays for Antifa out of his own pocket? ? The hole is deep. Feel sick yet? Q. Again, there are endless posts, 67 of them that cover this. I mean, these are posts worth reading because, again, anytime that one of these terms or groups or names or what have you is in the news, it's always worth getting on the Q boards and reading about it and reading about, again, what we were being taught back then. It goes on here again. This is post 839 from March 4th of 2018. It says, do you trust the mainstream media? Do you trust Facebook? Do you trust Google? Do you trust YouTube? Do you trust Twitter? Narrative, censorship. Do not blindly believe. Fake. They want you divided. Together you are strong. Apart you are weak. Organize, challenge, fight. Do you think Antifa was grown organically? Purpose? Watch the news this week. Q. The next post about Antifa was 6 days later, on March 10th of 2018, which is post 940, and it has the Antifa flags. The first one from 1933, which was the parliamentary wing of the Communist Party of Germany. Interesting. So if there was a Communist Party in Germany in 1933, then why would the other side be the bad guys also? This again is where you can figure out whether or not a person is knowledgeable or not. If a person groups fascism and communism into the same group as if they're the same thing, like Chris Plant does on a constant basis, over there on 105.9 WMAL Washington's Mall on his radio show, he does it all the time. I tuned into him, again, just for fun. The other day when I was driving around the other morning, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, I haven't listened to Chris Plant in, I don't know, at least 6 months plus. Let me just tune in real quick and see what he says at the top. At the top, I kid you not, within the first 60 seconds, he says, unless you're one of those Hitler, fascist, communist, Bolshevik types. It's laughable. It's like, wait a minute, they're not the same. They're not the same. He's not just comparing apples and oranges. He's comparing vegetables in a bag of sand. They have nothing to do with one another. They are polar opposites. Again, in this same Q drop, it then shows Antifa, the current Antifa flag, anti-fascist action. And it says 2017 parliamentary wing of the Democratic Party of America. And then Q just simply says, coincidence? Yeah, again, it's Zionist communism. That's the enemy here. And anybody who has been fighting Zionist communism, regardless of how long ago they were fighting it, those people are the good guys. Always been that way. In another Q post, again, they've got 3 historic pictures, black and white photos of Antifa back in the day in Europe and in Germany. And it simply says, this is post 941. Q simply said, these people are stupid. Maxine's stupid. Q. Yeah. Why does Antifa flag mimic that of the Nazis, quote unquote? Coincidence, quote unquote? The reason that it mimics the flag is because it's designed to try to brainwash you into believing that the National Socialist DAP party of Adolf Hitler and the German people are the same as Antifa. They're not. They're not even close. I'm going to read one more here. This is post 1688 on July 24th of 2018. Again, these posts specifically, again, there's 67 posts on Antifa alone. But here's what it says. It says, quote, "There is no greater current threat to the American people than the fake news media. Hashtag controlled MSM. Study Nazism. Compare/contrast Antifa. Compare/contrast socialism. Push." It says push for rebirth. Who financed then? Who is financing now? Dark to light, good wins, Q. Again, there's no such thing as Nazism. That too is a derogatory term that was created by the communists to disparage a free and together people who wanted peace. Because again, they have to make it sound like it's evil. Again, Nazism means Ignatz. It's not a compliment. And of course, the print media, being Zionist and Jewish and communist, they created the term in the first place. Again, I could rail on this all day long. Again, there's 67 posts having to do with Antifa in these Q drops. We learned about this all the way back then, almost 10 years ago. And again, a lot of us on the internet, even before the Q drops, were learning about Antifa and what they were before 2017. But they're also specifically brought up in Europa: The Last Battle, that documentary, which is mandatory watching for this entire audience, I think. But even so, within that documentary, the history of Antifa is very accurately and specifically brought up. You'll get all you can handle in that documentary. So I'm going to leave it there. But again, taking them down is a big deal, because even as Pam Bondi said in that same roundtable, you don't just take down the organization, you take down the funders, you take down the NGOs and the money laundering operations and the tax money laundering operations that have been behind it from the start. And then again, as even Donald Trump alluded to there at the end, you're talking about treason, which means you have to get rid of these people. You have to imprison them permanently, if not execute them, for trying to overthrow a government. Hell, we did it to the Rosenbergs in 1953. We can do it again. This is something that has to happen here. Again, the tree of liberty is thirsty. Time to fuel it. Time to give it what it needs. And this will reinvigorate an American people, whether they're ready for it or not. Because as endless people have said, certainly very important historic figures, Dr. Goebbels and other individuals, the truth is the best propaganda. The term propaganda is not a derogatory term. And it shouldn't, and certainly, it does, unfortunately, but it shouldn't have a negative connotation, because there's good propaganda also. And as he said, the best propaganda is the truth. The worst mistake that a government can make is believing that its people who elect them, that the people cannot handle the truth. That's not true. We can most certainly handle the truth. It's the constant deception that people have a very difficult time with, and rightfully so. Because they start looking for other people and other voices to give them, reassurances on a number of different things instead of thinking for themselves. This is why, again, I can't believe that people listen to Candace Owens all the time. They're constantly listening to her, Ryan Matta, and all these other people who are cross-promoting one another. And what are they actually doing? Are they telling the truth about what's really going on here regarding even Charlie Kirk or any other issue? Not really. They're just jumping from one lily pad to the next, hoping that everybody is grabbing onto their coattails every single time that they jump. Again, they're just exposing themselves as not being objective, but then again, they are the media also. They're infiltrators in all of this too. Why do you think they're allowed on YouTube after all? Yeah. It's long, it's a deep rabbit hole, but the truth does exist, and people can handle it. You just have to find it, and you got to do the legwork on your own. And again, all I try to do here is just try to point people in particular directions so that you can make up your own mind. You don't even have to listen to me or any of this. I'm 100% fine with it. Okay, moving on to education. I put together another Substack article titled "The Psychological Projection of Matt Wyatt." This is a local issue, of course, with A school board election coming up here just around the corner at the beginning of November. And of course, it's happening all across the United States in typical fashion as well. But again, this is where these school boards have to be doged, and these school districts have to be doged. And you have to get the right people in these positions to go through the finances brick by brick and line by line and page by page, and then bring the truth to the American people and the taxpayers within those local areas to see exactly where these school districts have been wasting money, if not downright stealing it. The problem with Matt Wyatt is that he's an activist. He's a left-wing communist activist. He always has been. He still is. He no longer works at Miami University. His time there only lasted 2 years, 2 years and 10 months. He now works as the senior director for principal giving at the University of Cincinnati Foundation. And he's much traveled. Again, he was the CEO of Voter Target, which apparently was some Louisville, Kentucky-based, I don't know, left-wing organization, if I had to take a guess. Not really interested in it, don't really care. But what's interesting from a behavioral standpoint is that people like him engage in psychological projection all the time. You blame people for the very things that you yourself are doing. And he's guilty of a great deal. And he's only been sitting on this board as an interim replacement for an outgoing board member for 1 year. And by not thinking for himself as an individual, not doing his due diligence and not doing his homework, this Matt Wyatt character has, he's violated his oath. Number one, he's violated endless ethics laws regarding the Ohio State Ethics Commission. And again, most recently, not only, of course, throughout the entire year has he engaged in a frame job, and certainly throughout 2025, a frame job of a fellow board member in Don King, but he most recently went along with the president of the school board and the superintendent in falsifying and allowing for the falsification of the superintendent's evaluation. Because again, when you sit on a board of individuals of a multi-million-dollar corporation, you're supposed to follow the law. You're also not supposed to just go along with what everybody else says. And that goes way beyond just a vote. It's not like, well, I vote for things that other people don't vote for, and I vote against things that other people vote for, which means we don't agree on everything. No, unfortunately for him, they're agreeing on all of the wrong things. Because his role as a board member, just like anybody across the United States, their role as a board member is to bring up on an individual basis something wrong that is occurring that should not occur. And if everybody is going along with trying to do something that is illegal, it is the individual board members' responsibility to figure out what is going on that is wrong and what is illegal. But they don't read policy, so they wouldn't know this. So again, the Ethics Commission has his name. All of these organizations and three-letter agencies have his name now. He thinks what? This is going to work out for him in the long run? As I told the board and him to his face, when these three-letter agencies get your names as a sitting board member and as a citizen of the United States, they build a dossier on you. They open up a folder, digitally or otherwise, with your name at the top, and they just start shoving paperwork in it, having to do with you every single time that they get something about you. And then eventually they pull the trigger. And they say, okay, we've got more than enough to make a move, now we're going to make a move on them. This is what these people don't understand. I mean, I find it fascinating that they are this dumb, but they aren't quitting. I mean, they're admitting their stupidity and even putting it in writing. Their compliance is guilt enough. Their inability to stand out and even write a letter and say something like, the evaluation of this superintendent was false. It was completely unethically done. You don't have the right under any circumstance to exclude the score of a fellow board member in the total score of the evaluation of a superintendent, because that's fraud. It's not just fraud, it's unethical to do it to begin with. It violates the oath of the board members themselves, along with district policy and state policy when it comes to evaluations of superintendents or anybody for that matter. And you can't do it. So all he had to do, or anybody else, was write a letter and say, the board president is attempting to do this and they can't do this. And the superintendent is willingly going along with it and knowingly going along with it, and they can't do that either. But instead of doing that, what is he doing? He's allowing it to take place. His lack of a dissenting voice is highlighting his participation in an unethical act. He's going along with it, which makes him just as guilty as the people writing letters openly agreeing that they're going along with it. Let me give you a taste of this guy's voice. Again, just very weak. Just weak. Not to mention, he doesn't know this either. When you're campaigning for a school board position, what you're supposed to be doing is you're supposed to be highlighting the flaws of the district and where improvement needs to be made. That's really what you're supposed to do, because no school district is perfect, which means you're literally supposed to look for the flaws. You're not supposed to be some, I don't know, pseudo-gay cheerleader for the district. That's not your job. Your job as a board member is, again, to dot your I's, cross your T's. Make sure everything is in place the way that it's supposed to be. Make sure that money isn't being misspent. But what's his campaign issue? His campaign issue this entire time is disagreeing with state government and attacking fellow board member Don King. And falsely so, because he was engaged in the frame job of Don King. That's his only campaign issue. State politics, which he has no influence in and will never have influence in, and then a fellow board member who's not even running for re-election. She's on the board for at least another year. So, what are you doing? But he doesn't know what he's doing, which is the fun part. Give him a listen, Matt Wyatt, in 3, 2, 1.
My parents taught me to stand up to bullies and to step up when called to serve. I served 10 years on a school board in Kentucky fighting for students. When I moved to Ohio, I thought those days were behind me. But when I saw a Talawanda school board member being bullied by Don King and her allies into resigning, I decided to step up and was appointed to the board to restore civility, integrity, and to put students first. But Don King, she continued. She used her credentials to access student and teacher data. Now, she wants to elect 2 of her allies to the school board to stack the deck and gain control. Our kids' privacy and our community trust is at stake. I'm Matt Wyatt. I'll always fight for integrity, and I'll always fight for a community that puts our students first. Because standing up to bullies isn't just what I do, it's who I am.
God, it's just so weak. He's so fraudulent. You can hear it in his voice. My parents taught me to stand up to bullies. Good for you. Good for you. They apparently taught you to be one too. Because if he were being objective, which he's incapable of being, he just blamed Don King for every single thing that he did. Matt Wyatt violated FERPA intentionally to frame Don King. He voted to release confidential information to target students and their parents, which then those students and parents were targeted by the superintendent and the building administration, and then blamed for accessing a system that they are lawfully allowed to access to see if their information, personal information of their own child and or their parents is being compromised. What Matt Wyatt also doesn't understand, that's his job also. He's allowed to access Google Workspace anytime he wants to make sure that the system is closed, secure, and safe, so that private information of minors is not easily accessible to anybody or accessible to anyone, except for individuals who, again, have direct access to it. He didn't do that. Again, he doesn't even read their own policy, which in the Substack article, I list the district policy. Talawanda School District Staff Technology Acceptable Use Policy, quote, "The board and SWOCA reserve the right to monitor any system or network information and activity to assure compliance with applicable policies, procedures, and rules." That means you have a responsibility to look into these systems to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing as a system, and that the people using the system are doing what they're supposed to be doing with said system. But he doesn't do that. He's a cheerleader. And cheerleaders don't get anything done. And then, of course, because he's a leftist, he researches the business of House bills and Senate bills and Ohio law regarding education, and then he whines on behalf of the left. Everybody's going to lose Medicare. Everybody's going to lose Medicaid. We're all going to go broke, but we want to raise your taxes. Again, they'll try for a levy again, whether that be next election season, not this year, of course, but potentially the next one or the one after that. These individuals, again, will try for another levy. Hell, he tried for levies down in Kentucky. Whether they passed or not's anybody's guess. I really don't care one way or another. But being on a Kentucky school board for 10 years is not a credential. It just isn't. Multiple levies, multiple superintendents, other board members coming and going. Again, it's not a credential. It's not something to hang your hat on. And one of his so-called largest, accomplishments, so he says, was that he was a part of some vote that outlawed charter schools in the local area where they lived. I don't know why that's a good thing. Again, he thinks that if you're not involved in the public school system, then there's something wrong with you, that you're the problem. Certainly if you decide to home learn, which is the most effective form of learning. But he's not interested in that because, again, he's a communist. So, whatever. He gets to be. It's a free country. But these people just dig their own graves, and they have no idea that even if he were to win, he'll still lose in the long run. Again, as I say in the Substack article, he's not going to make it 4 years. The Ethics Commission can only take so many complaints about a particular individual on a board before they prosecute. And this is a person, again, who has violated FERPA multiple times. So he'll do it again because he's that dumb. And by the way, yes, you do violate FERPA when you vote as a board member to release confidential and privileged information, which is what he did. So that's what that means. I can't believe this is difficult for people to understand. It's rather clear, I think. Okay. I should mention this. Speaking of Talawanda, and this is, again, a very little interesting database that exists, as bizarre as it is, but it does exist. There is a Talawanda local school district here book database, and you apparently can type in the titles of books to figure out what kind of books exist potentially within the libraries of these schools. Now, I don't know if it's just limited to libraries or if this also includes, again, books that are available within actual classroom settings. But this particular website is fetch.infoohio.org/SWOCA, SWOCA/TA. And what it does is it takes you to this search database where you can type in your school, or your school district, rather. And then in a drop-down menu, it shows you the different schools specifically within Talawanda themselves. And then what you do is you click on a particular school, takes you to another page where there's a search bar, and you can use, again, any search term you want to find books affiliated with said search term. So here's what I did. I picked Kramer Elementary School here in town, in the town where I live. And in the search bar, I simply typed in the word gay. And there are 12 books that pop up with the word gay in it. Get a load of these. The Pants Project. That's the first book, with the keywords affiliated with the subjects, again, that are affiliated with the book or associated with the book, include transgender people, middle schools, schools, uniforms, family life, lesbian mothers, gay parents, etc., etc. The next book is titled The Family Fletcher Takes Rock Island. The keywords affiliated with this book, keep in mind, this book and all the rest of them came up as a result of the simple search word, or keyword gay. It says family life, families, summer, lighthouse, neighbors, gay fathers, families, summer, lighthouses, blah, 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 blah. Another one, Heather has 2 mommies. Of course. Stella brings the family. That's another one. Gay parents, family life, gay fathers, blah, 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 gay parents. Another one, Donovan's Big Day. This is, again, the subject. Keywords affiliated with this book are stories in rhyme, weddings, mothers and sons, children of gay parents. Here's another one, Houndsley and Katina and the Quiet Time. Dogs, cats, snow, winter, and friendship. Well, why would that book pop up with the keyword gay then? We talking about gay animals now? Houndsley and Katina again. Here's one titled All About Deserts and Grasslands. I don't know why the term gay would pop up in that. Here's one called All About Water Ecosystems. Weird. Here's another one. Stella, Queen of the Snow. Fiction character, gay, is one of the keywords. Here's another one titled On My Island. Don't know what that is. And then, of course, another Stella, Star of the Sea. Fictitious character, gay. Okay? This is in elementary school. Now, again, if you go back, excuse me, and you pick another school here, and just out of curiosity, we're going to do that again. We're going to select Talawanda Middle School, the only middle school in town and in the district. I'm going to search the word gay one more time. We'll see how many books pop up. 14. Here we go. The first one is titled Thanks a Lot, Universe, with the keywords worry, panic attacks, friendship, secrecy, gay teenagers. Another book titled The Sky Blues. Keywords and subjects in it are gay teenagers, friendship, prejudices, cyberbullying in high schools. Another one, The Magic Fish, having to do with coming out, sexual orientation, and individuality. Another book titled The Only Black Girls in Town, Friendship, African Americans, Race Relations, Secrecy, and Gay Fathers. That's hilarious. Sorry. Why is it that the only book about African American girls is about gay fathers also? Not keeping things on the down low? That's good. Sorry, that one tickles me in all the right spots there. I can't. Oh, my God. It's amazing. It's like they're admitting, yeah, our dads are gay too. Okay. Here's another book. It's titled The List of Things That Will Not Change. Subjects include divorce, gay fathers, family life, weddings, and remarriage. Here's another one, The Best at It, it's called. Keywords and subjects include individuality, anxiety, middle schools, school stories, bullies, East Indian Americans, and more family life, along with probably gay people, yes, identify including that he might be gay. Okay. Another book, this is number 7 out of 14, available at the middle school apparently in their library, among other places. Because you know the most radical, as if these aren't bad enough, you know that the most radical exists within the actual classrooms themselves. Because they don't want them in the library, but, they'll have them in the classrooms just to hide them from people. Here's one titled The Summer of Jordi Perez and the Best Burger in Los Angeles. Is that a euphemism? The subjects are titled Lesbians, Gay Teenagers, Self-Actualization, Psychology in parentheses, Lesbians, Gay Teenagers, and Self-Actualization again. Another one titled Magic Misfits, the second story. Subjects include magic tricks, orphans, identity, psychics, friendship, and gay fathers. Jesus, these people are confused. Here's the next one. The Pants Project. I think I already mentioned that one earlier. Also available at the elementary school, Kramer Elementary. Transgender people, lesbian mothers, gay parents. And another one, this is book 10 out of 14, titled The Good Box. Again, also a euphemism. Homosexuality, high schools, friendship, Christian fiction, Christian life, and homosexuality again. Here's another one titled Two Parties, One Tux, and a Very Short Film About the Grapes of Wrath by a Stephen Goldman every single time. Subjects include friendship, interpersonal relationships, dating, social customs, gay teenagers in high schools, among others. Here's another one called So Hard to Say. Subjects include homosexuality, Mexican Americans, interpersonal relations, and schools. Number 13 out of 14 is one called Totally Joe. Subjects include school stories, family life, gays, friendship, families, and schools. And last but not least, it's titled Boy Meets Boy by a David Leviathan every single time. Subjects include teenage boys, gay teenagers, and male friendships. And on the cover of that book, it has 3 of those Valentine heart candies that say boy meets boy. Gross. This exists, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it exists. And this is, again, why you do a library audit. And you vote as a board to get rid of these books. And you can do it. And no, it's not some civil liberties, civil right violation. A school board has a great deal of pull. A same school board that can put these books in and keep other books out, a different school board within that same district can get these books out and other books in. They are a governing body elected by the people. That's how things can change. And they, of course, also have to change within the actual classroom instruction itself and the people doing said instruction, along with the people doing said administration. If these individuals don't follow board policy or seek to subvert it, that's insubordination, and in the state of Ohio, you can fire somebody for good and just cause. You don't even need a reason to cut them loose. But if they're tied up with unions, who cares? Insubordination is insubordination any way you slice it. And a school board, by the way, does not have to adhere to any teacher union. And a teacher union is not responsible, or a co-president or president is not responsible for hiring and firing. They have no say. That's up to the board. And if a board ever finds out that individuals who work within the school district are subverting board policy, well, say goodbye, because you're not going to work there anymore. That's the way that works. Go work in a gay school then. Go to Chicago. Go to New York. They pay them all kinds of money up there to be as queer as they want to be. Do it. This is the problem, though. These people, again, they don't know their jobs. They don't know their roles and responsibilities. The lines have been blurred. So much so, again, you have administrators believing that they're school teachers, entering classrooms, getting nosy, getting involved with students when they shouldn't be. That's not the job of an administrator. The job of an administrator of a school building is to manage adults. Make sure that the adults are doing their jobs, and if they're not, you hold them accountable. The job of the instructing and the job of the influence is with the school teachers themselves. That's their job. Everybody else outside of that, counselors, secretaries, what have you, again, those individuals are secretaries by and large, all of them, including counselors. In many cases, counselors are just secretaries. Certainly today, with the way that the different roles and responsibilities are being micromanaged and reorganized within the profession itself. But that's it. It's the elected people, again, that have more laws that they have to follow than just about anybody else. But as I've said before, and as you know, of course, school teachers themselves don't know what laws they have to follow either. They're completely naive when it comes to educational law. Case in point, here's a little segue. This was from Fox News. It was titled, "Disgraced Gym Teacher Who Repeatedly Raped 15-Year-Old Girl Has Been Murdered in Prison by a Convicted Killer." Of course, many of us would call this street justice, and this is what happens. Again, if people think that they're going to get away with something for long, well, you won't. You reap what you sow, and yeah, good riddance as far as I'm concerned. It says the following here: Wilbert Baldwin, charged with killing Ernest Nichols at Green Correctional Institution on Sunday. It says the following here: a convicted middle school teacher who was charged with repeatedly raping a teenage girl has been murdered in a North Carolina prison, according to officials. Ernest Nichols, 60, was found unresponsive inside his cell at Green Correctional Institution in Murray, if I'm saying that right, on Sunday morning at around 6:50 a.m., the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections said. The agency performed emergency life-saving procedures and called EMS, who pronounced the 60-year-old deceased at 7:22 a.m. He's a white guy, this Ernest Nichols rapist, and the guy who killed him is a black guy. The NCDAC spokesperson told Fox News Digital that Nichols was not murdered in his cell, noting that Green Correctional Institution is a maximum security prison with dormitory-style housing. Nichols was convicted of statutory rape in 2011 and was sentenced to 15 years behind bars. He was set to be released in September of 2027. On Tuesday, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation issued a murder warrant for 41-year-old Wilbert Baldwin. Baldwin, the agency said, was previously convicted of second-degree murder in 2010 in Richmond County. He was served with the murder warrant and given no bond. He was returned to the Department of Adult Correction to continue serving his current sentence. The NCSBI spokesperson confirmed to Fox News Digital that no additional details were available, and the authorities are waiting for Nichols' autopsy results to release a full report. Nichols worked at Ranson Middle School in Charlotte as a gym teacher for 14 years. After the allegations were made, he was suspended without pay and banned from the grounds. According to the local outlet, the disgraced teacher, who described himself as a pig, raped his 15-year-old victim repeatedly and watched his teen victim have consensual sex with others. Authorities said he had been posing as his teenage son on Facebook and had sent the teen girl sexually explicit messages. The victim also alleged that Nichols made inappropriate requests to her, asking her to make up some sexual stories and letting him know, quote, whenever she entered the shower, unquote. An arrest warrant revealed, according to WBTV. He was arrested in October of 2009 in his home. The agency said that the victim's mother confronted Nichols about her daughter shared the abuse, after her daughter shared the abuse. And authorities said that Nichols drove down Highway 73 and threw the video recordings into the woods. But the evidence was retrieved by police. He then pled guilty to statutory rape and was sentenced to 18 to 22 years in the North Carolina Department of Correction, unquote. Well, now he's in hell. So, thanks to the individual who put him there faster, and yeah, one more off the streets. Good enough for me as far as I'm concerned. Or at least one more that was going to be back on the streets, but not anymore. Thank God. Okay. Moving on. This will transition us right into medical-related things here. This was from WHYY.org. It was titled, RFK Jr. is demanding medical schools teach nutrition. Drexel and Rowan programs say they're already doing that. Now, as a quick little side story, as a part of my health education program, and bachelor's degree at Miami University, I took a nutrition course also. It was a semester long. And I will fully admit that I believe, certainly in retrospect, that it was overly complicated and unnecessarily so. It did not have to be as cellular and as complicated as it needed to be. It was also a dietitian course for licensed dietitians and people who wanted to be dietitians. I did not want to be a dietitian, but this right here should prove to people also that the instruction is only as good as the instructor's knowledge base. That if the instructor is using a government-riddled, pre-med dietitian book that only hones in on, again, the cellular aspect and biological aspect of so-called diets and or nutrition, quote-unquote, you're probably not going to be getting the truth. In fact, you can gain more knowledge on social media these days about fad diets and how dangerous they are, as opposed to the benefits of course, intermittent fasting, a well-balanced diet, not feeling like you have to eat 3 meals a day every single day to the brim until you're full and you can't move, along with, of course, the importance of exercising. Eating clean food, drinking clean water, staying away from high sugar, things like that. That would have been a far more beneficial dietitian course. But again, back in the early 2000s, the odds of getting such a course were slim to none. Now, RFK's brought this up before, that he's wanted to do this and advocated for this for quite some time. And again, although this article is new, him mentioning it certainly in the Oval Office, I've heard him say it in the Oval Office within the last certainly the last month, if not 2 months. So it's not necessarily that it's new, but again, this is highlighting how some schools already have, again, nutrition courses. And I have no doubt that they do. It just, again, boils down to how accurate are they? And hopefully they are accurate. It says the following here: the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services recently demanded that the medical schools teach nutrition, specifically medical schools, which again is a good thing, and that the organizations in charge of medical education standards had 2 weeks to come up with plans to teach it and include it in licensing exams and residency requirements. 2 local medical schools say that they're ready because they have included nutrition as part of their curricula for years. Drexel University's nutrition curriculum dates back to the late 1990s, said Michael White, professor emeritus of pharmacology and physiology at Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia. Medical students spend around 20 hours of class time learning about topics like vitamins, food labels, and how to assess a patient's energy and nutrition needs to have proper food for them during hospital stays. Well, that's not the only education you should be providing. I mean, that's rather limited, at least based on his description. It goes on, he said, quote, "Given how much nutrition we already cover, we don't have much to worry about with that declaration from HHS and the Department of Education," he said. Well, again, there's always more to learn. And if you close the door on learning, think of everything you're going to miss. He added that the medical school faculty at Drexel considers nutrition to be an important part of health, which is why the program has had it as part of their curriculum for so many years. Then it says, Cooper Medical School at Rowan University in New Jersey not only teaches nutrition across various courses, the school also has research projects and community service projects focused on nutrition, said, no way I get that name. It's an Indian name, sorry. An assistant dean professor of biomedical sciences at the university. For example, students participate in a local community garden to grow fresh vegetables, and also worked with local community group to explain to Spanish-speaking residents how to interpret food labels and how diabetes patients can build healthy meals from dollar store foods like dried breads and frozen vegetables if they don't have carbs. Again, I mean, you can see the left-wing bend in all of this. You can see it. Well, we plant a garden and we talk to the Spanish and Mexicans about food labels. That's not really what RFK Jr. is talking about. That's not really what he's bringing up. They said, quote, this particular individual said, quote, as a school, we try to do our part because we believe that Camden is our home. It's not just our workplace. That's good. Again, there's a federal push for more nutrition classes. The article goes on, as of course there needs to be, because, well, everything is a lie. The medical industry is a lie. The pharmaceutical industry is a lie. The nutrition industry is a lie. It's a massive rabbit hole. But again, just having a garden and speaking to Mexicans about food labels isn't going to get it done. That's not going to cut it. It's way more than that. And you can learn way more on social media about real nutrition and the real pharmaceutical industry and what it's always had in store for all of us on social media, again, far faster and far, again, shorter period of time than you can attending a college or obtaining some degree in said area. Case in point, jab-related things. This is from Dr. Makis's Substack, a quick little summary of some of the things that he has brought up here recently regarding, again, cancer. I have some audio to play as well. In fact, let me kick it off with the audio first from Dr. Makis. And then I want to play some other audio too. Again, first of all, this is Dr. Makis speaking to a British host. I've seen the British host before. His name has slipped my mind. My apologies. He's also been a guest on the Stu Peters show a long time ago. But anyway, here's Dr. Makis specifically talking about not just cancer, but what other individuals, of course, have been seeing regarding the COVID shots. This, again, arguably one of the largest problems with the medical industry and certainly the so-called education, quote-unquote, that is taking place. Give him a listen in 3, 2, 1.
There are only a handful out of the 100,000 doctors, Canadian doctors, that didn't take the vaccine that are still practicing medicine. So it's something like 99.9% vaccination rate. And they were the first ones to line up for their vaccines. Well, as I started looking at the sudden deaths of Canadian doctors, I realized, yes, most of them are dying from cardiac issues, heart injuries, cardiac arrests, dying while jogging or swimming, dying in their sleep. And Dr. Peter McCullough has talked about this extensively, about the myocarditis and the damage to the heart, the scarring to the heart. And then some were dying from blood clots, pulmonary emboli, strokes. But then there was quite a large subset of doctors who were developing extremely aggressive cancers. And cancers at an age that they shouldn't be getting. So, for example, there was a doctor who developed gastric cancer in his 30s. Presented at stage 4, he was dead in less than a year. Very rare brain cancers in young individuals in their 20s and 30s, medical students, medical residents. And these cancers would always present at stage 4, and they would always kill them in a matter of a few months, and it was always less than a year. And, at first I didn't know, what the term for this was or what the phenomenon was. I just started, really paying attention to it, tracking it. I then, realized that this is being called turbo cancer by people on social media. A turbo cancer is not a medical term, but it's a term that people came up with to really describe the extremely aggressive nature of these cancers in the COVID vaccinated. And these cancers behave completely differently, unlike anything I've seen before in my career. And I've diagnosed over 20,000 cancer patients in my career with cutting-edge PET-CT, positron emission tomography imaging, CT, MRI, pathological correlation. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen stage 4 breast cancers presenting in women in their 20s. I've never seen stage 4 colon cancers presenting in men and women in their 20s, 30s. Leukemias that will kill you in a matter of days or even hours after diagnosis. Lymphomas that, again, kill you in a matter of months.
He doesn't know anything, though. He's just a conspiracy theorist. Come on. This has been going on since the start. Childhood cancer didn't exist before the invention of inoculation. You'd think that anybody who has experienced childhood cancer would immediately say to themselves, you know what, I need to look up the history of childhood cancer. And not just do a Google search, but actually invest real time in looking in the deep recesses of the internet to find out the truth, or at the very least, ask a great deal of people who might not be in the mainstream who might know the answer to that question. Again, when it comes to the COVID shots, cancer production was almost immediate. It was immediate. And the simple reason why, and I think this is important, is why back in late 2020, early 2021, we were calling this a biological weapon, was because of the variety of illness and the variety of symptoms that was occurring as a result of taking these injections. It was massive. It was absolutely massive. Everything from permanent brain injury to being catatonic to diagnosis of illnesses that have never been within a person, ever. Certainly not within said individual who took the shots, right down to, again, cancers, amputation, blood clotting, etc., etc. The list is endless. Here was Dr. Makis on his Substack page. He said the following here, quote, more than half of American voters now believe that COVID mRNA injections are responsible for the skyrocketing excess in deaths being reported around the world, according to a new national poll. The Rasmussen Report survey found that 56% of likely U.S. voters say it is likely that vaccine, quote-unquote, side effects have caused, quote, a significant number of unexplained deaths. That figure includes 32% who say it's very likely. Only 35% rejected the idea, with just 17% insisting there was no significant deaths linked to the shots. Well, those people are crazy. It says the findings have barely shifted since September of 2024. The poll shows a deep and persistent, distrust in the government's quote-unquote vaccine narrative. Meanwhile, leading experts are warning that spikes in the excess deaths among the so-called vaccinated are far from over. In fact, many are warning that deaths are accelerating, with the worst still yet to come. A world-renowned cardiologist is raising the alarm to warn the public that the tsunami of vaccine deaths is not over for those who received COVID injections. Dr. Peter McCullough testified on mRNA shot harms before the U.S. Senate in May. He later told the public that millions remain at risk of sudden fatal heart failure. McCullough explained that many vaccine recipients are suffering from subclinical myocarditis, a hidden inflammation of the heart muscle and surrounding tissue. The condition often goes undetected until it causes catastrophic damage. Quote, the first manifestations of these microinflammatory scars in the heart can be fatal arrhythmias, unquote, McCullough warned. He went on and said, quote, patients are suffering cardiac arrest and are so severe, doctors cannot resuscitate them even in hospitals, unquote. He described COVID vaccine myocarditis as directly fatal, noting, quote, I've never seen any drug or biological product that's that dangerous that it can kill a previously healthy, normal person in a hospital despite all of the resuscitative efforts, unquote. And then it says long-term risk of sudden death. McCullough cautioned that the danger is not limited to the days after vaccination. The scar tissue left behind from subclinical heart injury can trigger sudden cardiac arrest months or even years later. Quote, what America learned, McCullough said, is that vaccine myocarditis sets people up for a risk of sudden cardiac arrest months to years after the shots. The Rasmussen survey and McCullough's testimony show a widening gulf between the official quote-unquote COVID narrative and the public's lived experience. With excess mortality rates continuing to rise and unexplained sudden deaths making headlines, confidence in big pharma and federal health agencies is collapsing. The warnings also come as the mRNA platform is being pushed into new vaccines for influenza, RSV, and even cancer. By the way, little side note, don't take those ever. He wrapped up and went on and said, however, the continued advancement of the experimental technology is raising fears, and the deadly risks may only spread further. For millions of Americans, the question is no longer whether the COVID shots were dangerous, but how long the damage will haunt the vaccinated, quote unquote. Above all, the public deserves to know when those responsible will be held to account, unquote. Agreed. And with that said, here's another piece of audio. This is Brooke Jackson. She was a Pfizer whistleblower. And she describes, again, I admire this woman greatly. She describes her what do you call it? Her time in Washington, D.C., back during the Ron Johnson roundtable, whatever, sessions that were happening back then, where, of course, the likes of Jessica Rose and Robert Malone and all those other so-called freedom doctors were showing up and sharing their particular statistics and stories. And you're going to listen to what Brooke Jackson has to say here about Ron Johnson. Fun fact, I first heard this approximately a year ago, perhaps 2 years ago, from actually A.J. Gochik, our favorite California lawyer. He specifically asked a friend of his or someone that he knew, talking again specifically about Ron Johnson, why Ron Johnson was taking this on, but also why Ron Johnson wasn't speaking out, Senator Ron Johnson wasn't speaking out more harshly about the shots. And he basically looked at AJ and said, if Ron Johnson came out and told his constituents before his upcoming election that the shots that he was pushing and or not warning people about could be the cause of their death, Ron Johnson will not get reelected. This is the sick political game that gets played, and this is the sick political game that even Brooke Jackson again brings up, which is why you never saw her at those roundtable meetings, because she got out of D.C. right quick when she heard things that she didn't like from Ron Johnson, among others. Give Brooke Jackson a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
But they all freaking know. They all know. Bobby Kennedy knows. Senator Ron Johnson knows. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go off here for a second. I will never forget being in a closed-door meeting with Senator Ron Johnson, some of the frontline faces that we all love, and we don't want to say too much. But I will never forget being in this meeting, and we're talking about DNA contamination and what that potentially means to patients with, let's just say a cancer diagnosis. Is this something that we need to be looking at? And I will never forget Senator Ron Johnson said, we can't just, because what we were doing in this meeting was trying to develop or create an agenda for the following day, which was going to be aired live to, the public. And so we're trying to come up with this agenda. And he said, we can't just go out there and tell the American people that there's a possibility that they're going to get cancer. I was, and Mary Bonin was there too. I was so disgusted by that statement, because we need to be warning people. People need to be able to take their symptoms and their scans or whatever they're looking at to their doctors and be able to discuss this openly. And I just couldn't believe he said that. And I hopped on the next plane that I could get on, which was like at 5:00 in the morning from DC. But I got the hell out of there. And I appreciate what he has done, certainly, like 100%. He's done great things. But damn him for saying that. Like that was 2 years ago. How many people could we have warned in that time that this is something that we know? It's now on the congressional record, right? At his own hearing. But 2 years prior, you said,
we can't say anything.
We can't scare people. People need to be scared. People need to be scared of the United States government, and people need to be scared, certainly, of the pharmaceutical companies who get away with it by the Department of Justice, by our government, helping them get away with these crimes.
She's right. You can beat around the bush. You can play political games. Well, I can't do that because I'll lose votes. I can't say that because this will happen. I can't do that because that'll happen. I'll lose some money. I'll lose some donors. I'll lose funding, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just get down to brass tacks. Tell the truth. Figure out what the truth is. Dump a bucket of cold water on people and say, wake the hell up. This is the Great Awakening. Get on board. Avoid these systems. Avoid these places. Avoid these people. Don't go along with the party line or the government line or whatever the old TV is telling you. Do your own research and figure out the truth, and then tell it and scream it from the mountaintops. That's remarkably important. Again, I love Brooke Jackson. She's the best. And she's right. To run out of Washington, D.C. again when she could have been on, Rumble and all these live streaming channels at that round table, she said, to hell with it. I'm leaving. I don't want to be a part of this because I don't like the approach that they're taking. They're soft walking this as opposed to, again, just telling everybody the God's honest truth. That, too, is why you're not going to see a Dr. William Mackus around a round table like that. It won't happen. This is also why, unfortunately, in the entire education business, there's been no roundtable, let alone any repercussions or consequences for what the entire education business did when it came to the COVID lie also. Because yours truly would have to be around that roundtable, would I not? Not trying to make it about me. I'm just simply saying, wouldn't I? But I wouldn't even get invited because I dropped the bucket of cold water on people. That the entire business and or profession, quote unquote, lied to everybody and abused children. Hell, I wrote a book about it. That's the problem. But again, this great awakening is not easy, but it is worth it. Of that, I am certain, and of that I know, which leads me now to this final piece of audio. This runs about 3 minutes, and I will leave you with this. This is an individual whose handle, it says here, is the original Mark Z, and they describe basically either their interpretation of the Great Awakening and what it means to them, and I tend to agree, no doubt about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with this piece of audio. Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening as always. 5 years in, here's to 5 more. I'll catch you on Monday. Peace.
To all my friends out there who know what is really going on, to all my conspiracy theorist friends, sometimes it's a curse and not a blessing to be awake. In my over 45 years of behind-the-scenes invisible intelligence work, I feel compelled to share the following for your consideration. Awakening is the most liberating, alienating, excruciating, empowering, lonely, confusing, freeing, frightening, expansive journey. And if you find yourself struggling, trying to process all this insanity, believe me when I say you are not alone. No one talks about the darkness that accompanies awakening or the grief we go through, not only grieving the life and illusions that you once had, but the realization that almost everything you thought you knew is a lie. The beliefs you've held, people you've trusted, principles you were taught, all lies. Shattering illusions is never an enjoyable experience. There is a considerable amount of discomfort that comes with growth, and the grieving process doesn't stop there. With these newfound realizations, you will find yourself grieving all over again. Grieving the loss of many relationships with people who just don't get it. Feeling alone, being ridiculed and shamed, not only by the masses, but for many of you, your very own family and friends too. Feeling like you no longer have much in common with the people you're surrounded by. Struggling with carrying on bullshit, shallow conversations that lack substance with those who are still fast asleep. Even feeling disconnected from your entire support system because they can't see what you see. Some even grieve the loss of their ignorance because ignorance is bliss and reality is harsh. Awakening can be a lonely road, and you will often find yourself journeying alone. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Awakening to the realities of this world is brutal. It will have you running through the entire gamut of human emotions. You have to master the art of diving down the darkest of rabbit holes only to come out and still function in daily life. And that's a skill people don't talk about enough. Some of you are or will struggle with feeling disconnected from family and friends. It's as though they exist in another world. Please know you are not alone. And not only are you not alone, you have an entire group of like-minded folks standing with you. You may be separate, we may be separated by miles, but we are deeply connected in mind, purpose, and spirit. God loves you, and so do I. Signed, Dave. Perhaps one of the greatest pieces or greatest emails or just fantastic.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.